Now, this is Wills Month. Did you realise that? The Law Society NI is encouraging people to make a will. I want to speak to Michael Robinson, President of the Law Society Northern Ireland from Cunningham and Dickey. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Frank.
Michael, I've spoken about this on this programme many times, and people still are reticent about making a will. They think it's some form of admission that their life is almost over.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, that's the problem. People put it off to another day because they look at it as a life and death issue. But in fact, making a will with a solicitor is really a friendly process, and the consequences of not doing so are totally disastrous on your family, potentially.
I know recently there was a number of charities, or at least one charity benefiting from a number of solicitors who, if you made a will, they would actually make a donation to the charity. They're bending over backwards to encourage people to make wills. But is that because there's a financial benefit for the solicitor in the long run?
No, it's not. It's trying to get people into the system so that, in fact, they realise the importance of doing wills. Going to your own solicitor to get a will drawn up, even if you're paying for it, in most circumstances the amount of money involved is very small. But the consequences, as I said, of not doing that are significant. If you're married and you've no will, people think that your husband or wife automatically inherits everything. They don't. If you're not married and you've no will and you're living with someone, your partner inherits nothing. So it's obviously extremely important that people look at that.
And you can, is it what, if you die with, is it dying intestate, is that what it's called?
Yes, if you die intestate and there's no will, people think that if you're married, your husband and wife automatically gets everything. That's not right. A whole lot of really complicated rules kick in, and your husband or wife doesn't automatically inherit everything at all. Similarly, if you've been living together with someone for a significant number of years and you die, people think that their partner gets the assets. The partner doesn't. It could go anywhere.
So, if you don't have a will, but you have a wife who becomes the widow,
yes,
she doesn't automatically get everything. Will the government take some of it in tax? Is that part of it?
No, the government doesn't take, but complicated rules under statute kick in. But say, for instance, you're married and you have a wife and children. If you die with no will, your wife gets the first £250,000, and then it's split up between the children and the wife. Now, that may seem like a lot of money, but most people's houses these days probably exceed the £250,000. So you could have a wife sitting in a house, and then the money shared out with the children, young children, held in trust. The wife needs access to the money. She can't get at the money because it's tied up in trust for the children. So the consequences are potentially fairly disastrous. Yeah,
it could lead to division between mum and children as well, couldn't it?
Well, it could, but if you've really, really young children, it could mean that there's a mother who's cash starved. So she's sitting on an asset, but she actually can't get her hands on the cash at a time when she needs that with a young family.
So go and talk to a solicitor. I presume that's what you're going to say, but you can also do it online, or is that a risk?
Well, I think let me give you an example. Several years ago, I did a case involving an elderly client who had done a will online, hadn't done it correctly. When it went through probate, it was kicked out because the will was ineffective. And in that case, his elderly partner, with whom he had lived for many years, inherited nothing, and the money went to a brother in Canada who was estranged from him and who he hadn't seen for 30 years. So the consequences of making a simple mistake in a will are quite disastrous. But the cost of actually going in and doing one is not large at all.
What are we talking about? Less than £100, that sort of
Probably,
money?
yeah, for an average will. Now, sometimes wills are, if you have a lot of money and it gets extremely complex and the solicitor needs to look at inheritance tax, the cost obviously goes up if they're big tax issues. But for the average person on the street, probably going in and doing a will with a solicitor, £75 to £100, it could even be less than that. And at some stages during the year, during wills weeks and that sort of thing, the solicitor will donate that money to charity.
But the solicitor must make money somewhere. Does he not get a percentage when it's actually the will's executed, or am I imagining
No, absolutely not. People will generally come back probably to a solicitor or someone to administer the will at death, but at the time of drafting the will there is no cost, or it's a very low cost process.
But the administering of the will, do you make a big profit then?
No, but obviously someone has to administer the will in due course, and that can be a solicitor or someone else. Generally it's a solicitor, and obviously there's a charge at that stage, but the charge at the later stage is not the point. If you don't have the will, the financial consequences are disastrous.
Yeah, but just on the charge, is it a fee or is it a percentage of the inheritance?
It depends on the solicitor. It depends. You go in and speak to your solicitor and you can phone around and get a quote for what they do.
But you could find yourself in a very difficult situation if you don't go down the professional route. What about video wills?
I've never ever seen a video will. Well, the Wills Act sets out very, very strict criteria, and that's a written will which has to be formed in a certain way with witnesses who are present with the person who's making the will at the time of his death, or at the time of drafting the will.
It is a video will, what I imagine it is. Someone just leaves on tape what they want.
But that's not effective. The legislation requires that there are very, very, very specific steps, and that's to protect the person making the will. Because, let's be blunt, if there's a dispute later, the person who makes the will is dead. Therefore, the law insists that there are very, very, very strict rules to be followed so that the person making the will knows that his will is effective on his death. I've never ever seen a video will. You see those in horror movies and on TV.
Yeah, you certainly hear them talked about. There's no question or doubt about that. One final question.
Yep.
Did I read a story recently or popped up on a screen somewhere in the studio in front of me about a local farmer, and he was dating a young woman, living with a young woman, and she felt that the farm was going to be hers and they weren't married, the will wasn't made, and she ended up getting nothing.
That's what I'm saying. I've given you an example of that. If you do not have a will and you're living, for instance, in an unmarried relationship, you could be living in that relationship for many, many years in a loving relationship, and if one of those parties dies without a will, then the surviving partner gets nothing in law. Now, there are complex rules and you can end up suing in court, but that's not really where you want to be. You want certainty, and doing a will, which, as I say, is a very, very low-cost thing to do with a solicitor, is the best way to protect yourself.
Michael, good speaking to you. Thanks for your time this morning. Thank you.
No problem at all. Nice to speak to you.
This is November Make a Will month, and it's well worth highlighting. It's up to yourselves, but at the end of the day, it may be the best £100 you've ever spent.